Hi, welcome back to Pages and Projects with Liz, and it is time for my December reading wrap up. This month I read 11 books, and I tried to knock out the books that were on my read this before the end of the year list. So we'll see how I got along with that as we go through. The first book I read this month was You Want to Be on Top by Sarah Hartshorn. So this was a memoir and written about her time on America's Next Top Model. This is a show that I did watch a couple of cycles of, at least the early ones. Definitely stopped somewhere along the way with those. But it was interesting to read the behind the scenes perspectives. So I feel like there's been recently a resurgence of people revisiting a lot of reality shows this year and talking about some of the things that were really problematic that maybe didn't notice that were problematic at the time. So it was cool getting to read a contestant's feedback. Her cycle was one that I did watch. And weirdly enough, it was because of the work that she did as an undergrad. So I was working in an office of disability services when her cycle was on, and she was a student worker in an office. So I remember getting an email out to one of the listservs mentioning the fact that their student employee was going to be on. And so I watched it in part for her. So it was cool reading her take on everything. By default, I rate all memoirs a 4-star. So I guess if there is something really exceptional, I would perhaps rate one a 5-star. But really, I feel odd rating someone talking about their life. So I default to just 4-star for them. So it was a fun read. The next book I read was The Kingdom of Sweets by Erica Johansson. So this was one of the Book of the Month books that I had featured in a video saying that I was really pushing it off a lot to read it. It had low ratings on Goodreads, but I thought since it was a retelling of the Nutcracker that if I didn't read it around the holiday time this year, I was probably going to end up pushing it off for yet another year. So, did go through and read it. As I was concerned about, I really didn't enjoy this. So, I gave this book a 2 stars. I just felt like some of the parts were very repetitive. And it just dragged. Like it had potential to be a really cool retelling. I have enjoyed other retellings of stories that I've read this year, but there was just something about this where it was so boring. I didn't care really what happened to the characters. I didn't find any of them really that likable, and I just wanted it to be over for most of the time that I was reading. So, definitely not a fan. Again, going to try this year to be better about my Book of the Month picks because I do still have some that I'm worried are going to be duds on my backlist. The next book I read was We Love You, Bunny by Mona Awad. This is a book that I was really looking forward to because I enjoyed the first Bunny. Unfortunately, with this one and kind of what I've seen from a lot of feedback, I just didn't like it as much as the first book. So I did give that book 3 stars. I just found that some of the cool, speculative, mysterious parts of the first book were just over-explained with the second book. The second book served as both a prequel and a sequel to Bunny, and it just felt a little forced at times. So there were some moments that I did enjoy, but other parts that, again, pacing just didn't feel great. Felt like it was giving a lot of explanations to things that I just wasn't really that interested in. So kind of a letdown because it was a sequel I was looking forward to reading this year. The next book was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This one I also gave 3 stars to. This was one of the books on my list that I wanted to read before the end of the year. It's something that I had been putting off quite a bit because I wasn't sure how I would feel. I think this was a book that it was just an issue of what I was expecting it to be versus what it ended up being. So I knew that it was supposed to be kind of a speculative version of Shakespeare and family life and kind of what went behind the book Hamlet. And so there were parts, again, that I enjoyed, but there were parts where it just felt too much. It just was a little choppy at parts. And again, that could have just been my expectations for what I thought the story was going to be like versus how it ended up being. I know that, this does have really strong ratings, and it could have just been wrong place, wrong time for me. I wanted to like it so much. But it just, I don't know, some of the descriptions, some of the pieces about one of the characters in there just felt like a little too over the top to then make anything really stick for the rest of it. It just, again, wasn't really for me. The next book was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, and this one I gave 4 stars to. So this one was a fun fantasy. The main character in here is a diviner. She winds up meeting up with some knights, trying to give some of the predictions. A lot of the diviners go missing, and so she's on this path to try to find them. There's a little bit of romance in here. It's not what I would consider to be the main part. It didn't have some of the writing that really gives me the ick with that. It was a good story. I was interested in it. I know that this also has had fairly mixed reviews from people, but I liked it. And again, similar to the last book, part of it could have been my expectations. I went into this expecting to, maybe have an okay time. But it was good. I am interested enough to continue this, which, if you've been following my last reading wrap-ups, is different. I've gone through a lot of books that are the first in a series this year with no interest in continuing them on. So I am looking forward to reading the second book in the series when it comes out this year and seeing how everything wraps up. There was enough about the characters that got me hooked. One of the characters in here, don't want to spoil a lot, it was just one of my favorite ones. Give a little hint, it's the gargoyle. So can't wait to see where this goes from here. Next up, we have The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies by Alison Goodman. This one I also gave 4 stars to. This is another book that is the first in a duology, at least, and I will be reading the second book in this. This just was really cozy. I think it tracks with some of the other books that I've said that I just really liked the vibes of, where you've got somewhat of a historical perspective, you've got strong women who are acting outside of society's norms to go ahead and solve some problems. Is the writing perfect? No, but there's something about that general storyline that's really clicked. And there's been a couple of just these cozy, badass women, defying norms kind of books that I've enjoyed. It didn't feel too over the top for what they were doing, although certainly unexpected. But again, just a fun book. Cannot wait to read the second book and see how the little love story progresses from this one too. Next up, we have Murder at Holly House by Denzel Mayrick. This one I gave 3 stars to. It's also part of a series, but not one that I am planning on continuing. This was another book that I said I wanted to read by the end of the year. It had what I thought was going to be a very winter holiday feel to it. I was expecting it to be more of a holiday mystery story. That's really not how it went. I mean, there was winter and snow mentioned, but that was about it. Versus what I was expecting from the cover. I liked part of this book. You've got someone who's not doing a great job, relocated to a smaller town to go ahead and try to solve crime there. Interesting characters, but then it just totally jumps. It starts to get a bit more of like a James Bond kind of feel. There's just so much escalation, and it just felt out of nowhere to go from this bumbling inspector detective kind of character to then taking down an attack of like this huge arms deal. So not really a huge fan. It was fine, but not enough that I'd want to continue with this. There were some references in there to the character maybe having a little bit more of a background that would make it make more sense, and maybe that comes out in the other books, but I have so many books on my TBR or other books that I want to be interested in that even though I'd like to know if there is some reason behind why he got involved with this, how his background connects a little bit more, I'm not interested enough to hunt out those other books in the series and actually go through them. So it was fine. It just really wasn't what I was expecting. I definitely thought it was going to be more of a holiday time mystery to solve. Next up is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This one I gave 4 stars to. I think I've given all of the Grady Hendrix books I've read so far a 4-star rating. I like his writing. I like how weird it gets with the twists. I kind of expect that from there, so it's not something that's throwing me off where I think it's going to be a very standard kind of story. I don't know that I would necessarily want to read a ton of his books in a row. I think I might get burned out from that feeling, but I definitely am looking forward to reading more of books from Grady Hendrix. So this one was fun and campy. You've got friends, you've got some issues that could look a little bit like typical teenage friendship type of drama, but there is a supernatural aspect to it. So really fun, very quirky, weird twists. I love the cover of this book and just the 80s VHS feel to it. So definitely enjoyed this. Looking forward to reading more from Grady Hendrix. Next up, I have The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa Matlin. This was another book of the month book. It was a mystery thriller kind of book. I've read several books this year, I realized, where the house is kind of a main character. This one I gave 3 stars to. It wasn't my favorite out of those, but it also was a little different from some of the other books that I had read with similar plot. I almost feel like I want to make a list of some of the plots that tend to pop up in a lot of these, get a house where something has happened in the past and weird things end up happening for the current inhabitants. So that part was cool. The characters were fine. One of them was trying to blog the renovations. So you also had a social media aspect to it, which again, very similar to another house related book that I've read this year with social media playing a role. Um, I read this one as an audiobook. So I'd mentioned in a previous video, but I have pinched a nerve. And even reading physical books gets painful at a certain point. Kindle books too. So just that repetitive motion with my arm. So I read a couple of audiobooks this year, continuing on with some of that for January too, just to try to pace and give my body some time to rest in between. So even though I had the physical version of this book, I listened to it as an audio book because it popped up from Libby. So I was trying to find some audio versions of books that I already had on my shelf so that I could make progress towards my physical TBR, not adding in a brand new book that I didn't have. So I was happy to actually get through this. But I really didn't like the audiobook. There's a lot of moments where there's references to the creaking noises, and the audiobook just got really annoying with the creak kind of sound effect that the narrator was doing. So that part really didn't enjoy. I did try to keep my rating based off of the actual story. So even if I read it physically, I think it still would have been a average 3-star book for me. But that aspect of the audiobook really threw me off every time I was listening to it. So again, fine, run-of-the-mill mystery thriller book. It was nice to get my mind off of things. I didn't have to concentrate too much. And there was an interesting twist with this one as to why some of the issues were going on with the house. And that I thought was pretty inventive. And I just wish there was like a little more to it. Next up is The Christmas Murder Game by Alexandra Benedict. This was the last book on my list of books that I wanted to read before the end of the year, in part because this also was holiday themed and I didn't want to wait another year. I was really intrigued by this book, where you've got someone going back to the house that they grew up in. There's a mystery game that they're going to have to solve around Christmas. So puzzles, family drama, inheritance. Again, some things that I've read several books about. That would be another big theme, is games to solve. And this one was fine. So this book I gave 3 stars to. There were some parts that I really liked, but then it got a little repetitive. So some of the puzzles where they would go through, figure out how to solve them, I was expecting more variety with the puzzles, and it was pretty repetitive. So once you had it explained once as to how you got the answer, it just kept up with that. And then some of the puzzles, you needed to know a little bit about like the family dynamics to solve them. So it was hard, to just solve it on your own without actually knowing some of these people. I thought that you'd be able to do that. Also, one of the characters that ends up being involved in the killing aspect of this, I called early on. So based off of the warning that the relative had given about, not trusting people, you knew as soon as they were talking about one of them and the relationship between those two people that they were going to be involved. Or at least I found it very predictable. I also, while I didn't fully make the connection to how one of the characters pops back up at the end, and I'm trying to be vague to not spoil it, there were some references, including to sneezing, that came up frequently, where again, I was just like, yep, there's going to be a connection with this. So while I didn't guess 100% what the ending would look like, I did know that there was something going on with that person and the house. So again, it was fine. It was a nice read around Christmas time to get through, but not much else to it. And the last book I read for 2025 was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was a book that my partner picked as part of my 12 Days of Bookmas videos for me to read before the end of the year. And I squeaked it in right before New Year's hit. So this book I gave 4 stars to. I think he did a great job selecting it for a book for me to read. I've found that I like a lot of Gothic literature, or at least modern books that have a Gothic literature feel to it. I've read some Gothic literature classics in the past as part of my undergrad degree, and that's something that from all of these I want to read more of this next year. So I've already purchased some classics, the basics of Gothic literature, and I want to spend time this year going through them so that I have a better appreciation for how some of these elements come up. So you have odd family dynamics, things that are a bit supernatural, fungus and mold, just a lot of these elements that I was interested. So very great read to finish the year. This book I read part physically and then part audiobook. So I read a little bit faster physically than audio. So when it was coming down to crunch time of wanting to make sure that I did finish it before the end of the year, I switched over to reading it physically, but I liked both versions of it. So I enjoyed this, and I am certainly interested in reading more from this author. So there you have it. Those were the 11 books that I read in the month of December to finish off my reading year for 2025. Big shift from some of the early months last year where I was reading, 1 to 4 books a month. So I certainly picked up my pace, going through some books and trying to make progress in getting through my TBR. And some of the things that I've realized from the past 2 months at least of reading books, I'm carrying over into 2026 as part of my reading goals. So things like going through and reading more of my book subscription packs, going and reading some classics, trying to read more audiobooks. So all of those are things that I'm hoping to do more of this next year. I'm not trying to hit some outrageous number or expect that every month I will read 8 to 11 books. My reading goal for 2026 is still just 52 books. So if I can read an average of 1 book a week, I'll be really happy. I'll still make some progress. So I'm hoping to continue to have some good reading finds and, make better selections for some of my books moving forward. And then hopefully to continue clearing out some of the books that I have around, the ones that I've been putting off. I think some of the ones I end up hyping up so much that it's just hard for it to not be a disappointment by the time I get around to reading it. And maybe if I had read it sooner, I wouldn't have had those exact expectations. So trying to get through books a little bit faster after purchasing them instead of acquiring them and then having them sit on the shelves for a while. I'd really love to know how many books you read in the month of December. Did you have any standouts? Looking forward to next year, I'd also love to know if you have any holiday related books that you think were really fun. I feel like the past 2 years I've tried to read some winter, holiday, festive season types of books in the month of November and December, and finding quite a few that are just okay or duds. I don't know if that's just my luck or I thought it's typical of holiday books that they just don't tend to stack up. Also, if you know any other book recommendations that are similar to Mexican Gothic or to the Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies, I would love to know that, because these were some books that I enjoyed. I have tended to enjoy a lot of those themes, and so I'm interested in continuing to read more of those this next year. So leave me some suggestions in the comments below for books for me to check out. With that, I hope you had a great reading year for 2025, and I hope that you'll stick around and join me for more reading and craft projects for 2026.